The great thing about traveling in the RV and the trouble is that you feel like you can bring everything. Um, how does that RV travel affect the camera gear that you bring? Even though this wasn't a particularly photography trip, um, did you bring specific things because you had the extra room that you might not have brought with you if you were flying?
Yeah, I mean that it definitely happens more often than I care to admit, in that I don't think as hard about the equipment I'm bringing because I have that much extra more room. I don't have to think about the weight when I'm going through the airport. Um, I don't have to think about the number of bags and all that kind of stuff because I have to pay extra for those. And then when I get to my destination, carrying all that stuff from the terminal to my car or to whatever. In the camper, you kind of like fill it up with stuff. And you kind of get lazy and you don't spend as much time critically thinking about what to bring. As you say, well, there's a chance I may do this, so I'll just bring it. Whatever, it's just one more thing. And I will tell you, even though I have all this experience in travel and I've done quite a bit of traveling in the camper, I still suffer from that. When I went to Yellowstone, I brought probably two or three pieces, significant sized pieces of equipment that I really shouldn't have brought with me. They got in the way. I was always moving them from one place to another because was trying to move things around, and I never really got to use them. So I would definitely I need to be a little better, and I would encourage people to really think critically, even if you have a camper, even if you have all this room to take stuff with you, to think really critically about what to bring, because it's not just about the room and having the inconvenience of having the stuff around, but also it's the distraction of having that stuff around with you. Is that you think, well, maybe I brought that along, maybe I should use it, because after all this time, I've been having in the car, as opposed to focus on what's in front of you and concentrate on other things.
Sure, especially when you're traveling that way with your family, and then you have all these tools that you don't necessarily need, and you just feel like you should get them out since you brought them. What are a couple of things that you brought that you could have just left at home?
For example, I brought a slider. Even not sure if or listeners know what a slider is. A slider is a mechanism that allows you to put the camera on it, and actually, when you're shooting video or you're shooting time lapse, allows you to do slow pans or slow movements, slow predictable movements with the camera itself. So there was that. There was my big complicated time-lapse equipment that I brought with me. I could have done with just smaller equipment. I did my small equipment. I brought 3 tripods with me, including a video tripod that I didn't need. I brought my video camera, which I didn't use once. I shot everything. I shot all the videos with a GoPro and my iPhone and with the camera itself. So again, I fell into that trap of, oh, why not bring it? I have the room. So I should have thought a lot better about that.
Yeah,
I probably could have saved a couple dollars on gasoline alone by not carrying that extra weight.
probably so. And it's funny because I'm making that same decision right now, packing for Costa Rica in a couple of weeks. I've got my slider ready to go, and I'm thinking I'm going to be teaching, and then
Right.
I'm doing not exactly the same type of a trip, but I'll be working for a week, and then my family's meeting me down there, and then we're going to travel for a week. So in either of those cases, I don't know when I'm going to be able to break out my slider and do some, really intense video stuff like that. So I know exactly what you mean. I have an extra tripod there. Like, well, maybe I'll bring that. But I've got to fly with the stuff. So if I was in the RV, I would just throw it in and not even worry.
Right, but I'm telling you, man, that stuff was in the way almost every day. I was cursing myself almost every day because that
Yeah.
stuff was in the way. And like I said, you're thinking, man, I should use it because I brought it with me, and kind of felt a little guilty about it. Whereas if I hadn't brought it, I would not have thought about it at all. So.
Right. Well, is there anything that you wish you'd brought with you that you didn't have?
Not really. I mean, I was, I'm pretty good about the equipment that, I've been doing this for so long that it's almost a reflex reaction as to what it is that I pack. I have my bags. I know the type of trip I have. Like, how some people are obsessed with shoes. I've had kind of an obsession about camera bags. I think most photographers
I think
do.
we all do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have like 6 different camera bags, but truly I use them. I used to have more, but I've pared it down to about 6. And the reason is because they all have their specific use. So depending on the trip that I'm going, I know which camera bag to pull, and as I'm looking at the camera bag, I know exactly what equipment to bring with me.
Right.
So no, there was nothing that I thought I should have brought that I didn't. Only because I've done this so much that, and I have forgotten things so many times before that that I do remember pretty well what to bring with me. And I've done in the past put lists together and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I don't even look at the list. I just remember that. I think that writing out the list helped me mentally remember what those were. Where some people really need that checklist to go through. But I've gotten a little bit beyond that at this point.
Sure. And that's a good tip, too. The problem with changing bags all the time is then you try to remember what goes in what bag. So I have, like you, just sort of a couple of regular bags that I use, and I look in those bags, and I know exactly what's supposed to go in every slot. So if something's missing, I have a visual reference as to what goes in there.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point because I'm sure that you do this too. Is the bags that are set up. I've set the dividers inside the bag, and I know exactly what goes in each of those slots.
Right.
So if I look at the bag, I can immediately tell if I'm missing anything because I always put the same lens in the same slot or the same camera in the same slot, the same piece of equipment in the same slot, so I know exactly where everything is and where it should be. And
Right.
I think that's part of that. That's what helps me remember what not to forget.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great tip. Well, tell me about your workflow when you're on the road. If you're, are you downloading images to your computer every night, or is it every couple of days since it's not a specific photography trip or something like this?
Well, for something like this, I think it varied. I think the we're all eager to look at our images at the end of the day when we take them. So as much as I could, I would actually download my images at night. And I try to keep things as simple as possible because I always feel that when you keep things simple, it helps you remember them and it helps you repeat them, reliably every time. So my workflow was typically, every night after dinner or whatnot, when everybody was sort of calming down and we were sitting around the fire or having a few drinks, I pull up my laptop, get the cards, put them in, and download the images. And as soon as I download them, I would then import them into Lightroom and then perform a backup immediately to another drive. So images are always in two drives. And only until those images were backed up to a second device did I then format the cards that are in the camera. You'd think that doing this, especially with the family and all that stuff, would be a little distracting, but people enjoyed it. People wanted to see the images of the day. People wanted to see, what I was able to shoot because they were looking at the images they had taken with their phones, right? They're all like, oh, look at this, and sharing their images. But they wanted to see what I was able to shoot with the big camera and the big lenses and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of a cool event of, them passing the laptop around and having people look at the images and, oh, that one's great and whatnot. There were some days where, we did more other stuff, like we went horseback riding and then we went river rafting and all that kind of stuff. Those days didn't necessarily take as many images. So maybe some days, I would skip a day and not download that day. But typically I try to do it every day, if nothing else, to share the images with everybody that was with me.
Sure, cool. Now, are the cameras that you're shooting now, are they Wi-Fi enabled? I know most of the newer models are.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't have newer models then. No, mine are not Wi-Fi enabled. I shoot primarily with a Canon 5D Mark III, which is getting almost, around 3 years old at this point. Getting right up there. And it was, the camera that came out after that, I think the 6D is the one that came out not soon after that, came with Wi-Fi. The 5D Mark III does not have Wi-Fi. So that's my primary camera. My backup camera is a 7D, which also doesn't have Wi-Fi. As well, but I have shot with some cameras that have Wi-Fi, and I found, at least up until now, or at least the way I did it, I found a little bit cumbersome to deal with that. Plus, they sucked a lot of the battery life of your battery as well. So my experience wasn't all that great with using Wi-Fi. I mean, I can see it where, in a particular scenario, in a studio setting or things like that would be actually really helpful. But in the field, like with the type of photography that I do, which is mostly wildlife with some, landscape thrown in there, I think it's just not as convenient to do.
Right. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. The first couple of cameras I got with Wi-Fi, I guess I got 2 years ago, and I thought, well, I don't need to use that. But the more that I do road trips and think about social media and sharing images, the
Mm-hmm.
more I use it. And the way that I'll use it I went shooting with my buddy Rick Garrity. We went out scouting a workshop out west, and so we would leave a location, and we'd have these great images, and we would immediately upload them to our phones, and then as soon as we got Wi-Fi or phone service, we would upload them to Instagram or Facebook or
Mm-hmm.
Google Plus and that kind of thing. I definitely don't use it for downloading a whole card full of images or anything like that. It takes too long, but for uploading a couple images here and there that you can share immediately, I think it's really great. But again, that just depends on if your camera doesn't do that, then you're
Right.
probably not.
Yeah,
Not doing
and
it.
honestly, I mean that and I think it would also depend on the way you like to share your images. I typically don't share much that I haven't looked at on the computer itself. That I've had a time to really look at it and perfect it. I'm kind of again a perfectionist in that sense that I don't really share or post stuff that I wouldn't print and hang on my wall.
Sure.
So I'm not someone that shares so freely from that perspective what images are there without me having had good time to look at them and edit them,
Hmm.
if needed. But if I did, having that capability would be really neat, especially if you were able to transfer, like you said, to an iPhone or an iPad or something like that, do a little bit of editing in Snapseed and then uploading them from there.
And that's exactly what I'll do is use Snapseed or ViscoCam or something like that.
Hmm.
And like you said, just polish it a little bit, and a couple images here and there. I think is great.
Cool.
Well, have you heard about more people using RVs lately? I feel like everywhere I turn, somebody's talking about they're going to rent an RV or something like that. Do you think it's kind of having a resurgence?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, I know that most of the RV companies are making, record sales. For example, Airstream, which I'm very familiar with, has sold more Airstreams sold more Airstream in 2013 than ever in its history, even in the heyday of the RV industry, which is, around the Great Depression, believe it or not.
Really?
The RV industry developed kind of at the end or flourished at the end of the Great Depression because it was a simple, cheap, way for Americans to travel at a time when, a lot of people didn't have a lot of money and, they were kind of down and out, so to speak. So it was easy for people to get, at the time, a lot of people built their own campers, and that's what developed the research, the industry, the RV industry, so to speak, and that's when the golden days, as they said, of the RV industry was when they were, I don't know, something like 400 RV manufacturers in the country at that
Wow.
point in time, and more RVs were sold then. But nowadays, all of these, most of these, especially, Airstream has sold more RVs, more campers in 2013 than they sold any other time in history, and a lot of other companies are doing record sales. I heard something recently that there is a shortage of transporters for the RVs because
Wow.
most of the RVs are made in Wisconsin, or not Wisconsin, in somewhere in the Midwest. I forget which state it is, but somewhere in the Midwest, and they need to be transported from there all over the country. Right now, there's over a 6-week waiting period before an RV can be transported because there's
Oh,
so
wow.
many being built and so many need to be transported, not enough people to move them. So yeah, absolutely, there is absolutely, no, without a doubt, a resurgence of the RVs and the campers. You see more of them on the road than you've ever seen, and there's also more and more companies that you can rent RV from, so that if it's something you want to try out, it's really easy to try out. It's not cheap to rent them, but it's something you can do to make sure that this is a lifestyle. This is something that you want to do because it's not for everybody. Some people just don't take to it. Some people do, but you can rent one. You can even now there's even a company that will rent the Airstreams together with a car, with a truck to pull them with.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's called RV or Airstream to go, and they're mostly out west, but they have a place in Montana, and actually in Bozeman, so you can rent them there to go into Yellowstone and whatnot. They have them in Vegas. Vegas is their big location.
Nice. And that's pretty central to a lot of places that you might want to go and camp anyway.
Yes,
Wow.
right.
That's cool. Yeah, because even with gas prices the way they are, it's still cheaper to have an RV, pay for gas, and pay, what, $25 a night for a campsite than it is to go get a hotel room. And the more people that you're traveling with, the cheaper it becomes. You know,
Right.
our
Yeah,
coach
go
has
ahead.
enough
Sorry.
room for. We've traveled with when our son was young, with our son and another couple. So with 5 people, it becomes. I mean, the cost per person is next to nothing.
Right, right, and not only that, I mean, yeah, there campgrounds. You can find campgrounds that are pretty inexpensive. You can find some campgrounds that are very expensive, but
For
you can
sure.
even camp in a lot of places for free. You know, when I'm traveling long distances, you know, I have a book that has camping for, I forget what it's called, RV sites for free or something like that. Yeah, the title's a little misleading. It's basically locations where you can camp for $12 or less um, for a night. And you know, there's a lot of, and it also talks about the different restrictions in different states. So, for example, in some states, you can actually stay overnight at the rest stops.
Hmm.
So, if you're just cruising through the interstate to get somewhere, you may be able to pull at a rest stop and stay there for free for the night. Yeah, so you're not going to be in a particular pre-location or anything, but if all you're trying to do is get from point A to point B, you can stay overnight in some places for free. There's also a lot of places you can stay for free or cheap. For example, the BLM lands, the Bureau of Land Management lands. There are a lot of places where you can stay for free in those. If you ask for what's called dispersed camping, where you go down a dirt road and there's places where you can stay. There are little campsites. There are no facilities. You know, there's no water and no sewer and no electricity or anything like that. But you can camp for free. I remember I stayed at some towns have fairgrounds, and some of the fairgrounds will have little sites next to them, kind of like a little campground that you can stay at, and some of them are even free. I remember I stayed at a campground, probably a really nice little campground at this fairgrounds in a town called Blue Earth. That was South Dakota. Now I can't remember. States are all kind of like merging into one another, but it was called Blue Earth. And the campground had water, sewer, and 50 amp electric, and it was free to
Wow.
stay. You could stay only for 2 nights for free, but
Hmm.
it was absolutely free. So, you know, you can do it even on the cheap if you need to. And if you find state campgrounds tend to be cheaper than private campgrounds as well. So there's a lot of different ways to actually make it pretty affordable to camp.
Absolutely. And we've stayed at in Walmart parking lots before too.
Right.
A lot of Walmart. Some of them have signs actually that say no RV parking because
Right.
the word sort of got out that you could stay at Walmarts for free. But we've stayed for free overnight at Walmarts. But then there's a spot down near St. Augustine Beach that we get a campsite right on the dunes, right on the beach for I think it's $45 a night.
Right.
You basically, you have a beachfront, condo that you drove with
Right.
you for $40 a night, and you can't
Right.
find that
Yeah.
in any sort of hotel or anything.
Right, you can't get that. You can't get that anywhere else. Yeah, and the Walmarts is one thing. There's a lot of Cracker Barrels that you can stay at as well,
Right.
and whatnot. Typically, it's always a good idea to call the manager and ask the manager to make sure that you can stay there. In some of them, I know, for example, Bozeman in Montana, particularly itself, Bozeman, the town itself, doesn't have that many campgrounds. I think there's only like 2 campgrounds within close to the town, and there's another one that's about 20 miles away. So if you go in the summer to the Walmart in Bozeman, it looks like a campground. I
It
mean, the
looks like a camper dealership.
oh my God, the most campers I've seen ever. And some people were grilling, some people had their chairs out. I
With
was
their
just
awnings
taken
out.
aback. Yeah, the awnings. It was incredible. So yeah, I mean, I'll admit that I've stayed at a Walmart every once in a while. Typically, when I'm just going from one place to another, and there's nowhere else to stay, and I'm just trying to make time, I'll drive as long as I can until I get tired, pull into the closest Walmart, make sure I'm able to stay there, and make that. And the other thing that's kind of convenient on the way back, there was one night that we stayed at a Walmart. I typically try to stay at the super Walmarts because those are open 24 hours a day, so there's activity around you and whatnot.
Sure.
And I forget which state we were in on the way back. It was a super, super hot night, and of course I can't run my AC because I'm not connected to shore power. I'm running off the batteries. It was super, super hot. I woke up at 2 in the morning and I was sweating. This is incredible. So guess what I did? I got up, walked into the Walmart, bought a fan, 12-volt fan, brought it back into the camper, and plugged it in and slept like a baby the rest of the night. So there's the advantages to staying at the Walmarts.
Oh, for sure. And then you stop if you need groceries in the morning. You just
That's right.
whatever you need,
Yeah.
need some toilet paper or something. You're already there
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
Well, what's the next trip for the coach for the RV?
Well, we I live in Maine, and the camping season here is short. There's only 6 months out of the year, actually less than 6 months out of the year. So we try to take advantage of it as much as possible. Um, but this past few weeks have been kind of complicated and busy. So I haven't made plans for this coming weekend, which is a long weekend. So today, that's after we're done with this interview. That's my number one task, is to find a place to go, because we try to go at least every other weekend during the camping season. Believe it or
Oh,
not,
wow. Great.
camping. So we go camping a lot within the state of Maine. Sometimes we head to New York. Oftentimes we go into Canada. There's a lot of great places to camp in Canada. Um, Definitely into New Hampshire and Vermont as well. So I think this weekend we're going to stick nearby, but and then I'm going to try again. We're going to try to go as much as we can until the snow comes in. Because even though the campers have heat and all that kind of stuff, what happens here is that, especially Northeast, is that in Maine and New Hampshire, Vermont, and Canada, the campground's closed usually around October 1st.
Right.
October 1st, October 15th, that's it. The season is done for the year. So there's not that many opportunities to go camping after that. So right around there, I go ahead and winterize the camper and just put it away for the winter until May.
Yeah.
Or April, May, somewhere around there.
Sure. Cool. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on, and tell the listeners where they can find you and find out about your Airstream and your other workshops and everything.
Well, everything is linked off of my website, and my website is Juan. That's Juan Pons, Pons .org. And in there you'll see links onto my Airstream blog, where I have a kind of little travel dialogue that I'm still catching up on from the trip that I was out. I have a lot of the pictures that I'm going to use already, but I always like to write a little bit of what was going on at that time, so I need to go in there and keep updating. So I'm somewhere in mid-July right now, trying to catch up with that trip. So yeah, you can go there, and then in there are links to my workshops as well. This coming, some of the workshops that are coming up is obviously have Yellowstone, which I do every year, which is one of the most spectacular workshops. I'm doing a workshop in Acadia in October, and then I have this epic trip to Alaska, where I've chartered a private yacht to take us around during the herring spawn, where all the eagles come down, and there are hundreds of eagles coming down, and not just the eagles, but the whales and the seals and whatnot coming in to catch the fish and eat them. So we're going to be shooting killer whales, eagles, all sorts of other types of whales and seals and all sorts of stuff, plus landscapes. And we're going to be in a chartered boat with a gourmet chef,
Wow.
and even wine and beers included.
Wow. When is that?
That's in April of next year. So, and it's a 10-day trip up in Alaska. So it'll be a lot of fun, and we're going to be in protected water, so we're not going to be in any of the rough seas or anything like that. And we're going to concentrate on wildlife and landscapes.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yes.
Well, cool, man.
Oh yeah, so check them out at my website. It's juanpons.org.
For sure. Okay. Well, thanks again, buddy. And I will talk to you soon. And I'll see you next week on your itinerary for travel and photography.
Thanks a bunch, Rob. Take care.